Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome to our World of Darkness, where today we'll be continuing our read-through of Chicago by Night for 5th edition Vampire the Masquerade. We are on Chapter 4, Kindred of Chicago. And we've just finished the the Banu Hakim section, and we're moving on to the Brujah, where we start with a quote, just as we do through all of these. I despise your lapdog devotion to thy Ivory Tower. But whatever your beliefs, you must unite our clan against the Ventru. Critias, are you listening? Tyler, in her parting conversation with Critias. The Brujah have ever been a clan of individuals, yet it was the wish of Tyler, one of the eldest Brujah of Chicago, that the clan unite against Ventru tyranny. Before the beckoning drew her away from the Windy City, she addressed Critias and instructed him to keep the clan together. Due to their numbers and relative strength, the Brujah could potentially oust all opposition. Tyler's wish was not to be, as Critias was bewitched by the fraying blood bond he shared with his sire. He doesn't even recall Tyler's reason for departure. He just knows that she was there one night and gone the next. The Brujah stand at the precipice, where they face civil war, with the Hellenes on one side and the Fiors on the other. The former believe earnestly in the Camarilla's traditions, while the latter riposte that freedom for kindred is impossible within such a strict hierarchy. The Fiors consider the Hellenes sellouts, scabs. With Critias among them, the Hellenes have the weight of power on their side, but the Fiors increase their number. It may soon spell an end to Prince Jackson's tolerance for Brujah in Chicago. The clan may be forced to fight for its place or flee to another domain. The Hellenes. Critias leads the Hellenes with the Eternal Academy. He proves his clan fealty to the Camarilla through implementation of Kevin Jackson's tradition education program, taking freshly embraced fledglings, especially Catif and Duskborn, and schooling them hard in the correct way to behave as kindred. Failure on the course is not an option. Jackson has authorized one of the other Hellenes, the Sheriff Damien, to quietly eliminate any new vampire who pose a risk to Chicago's masquerade. Critias likes to consider their branch of the Hellenes as strongly logistic, in a philosophical sense. Adversely, breeding strange bedfellows as Balthazar sits among the Hellenes, and this is due to his acting as loyal hammer for the prince to swing. But it is more due to the Anarch Brujah wishing him dead. Critias and Damien want nothing to do with him, but he keeps gravitating towards them in Elysium. Critias, Doctor. Epitaph, philosopher, polemicist, Brujah primogen. Quote, old ideas can rejuvenate. Carthage, the ideal, is old and new again. Clan Brujah. Mortal days. A lifetime of study and debate. In Athens, the sophists constantly questioned the morality of their society. One of the most hated sophists was Critias, due to his keen, incisive questioning and intense wit, making him both compelling and entertaining to the intelligentsia and the masses alike. He acquired a substantial following, many of whom went on to become renowned philosophers, and grew indolent on his growing wealth and prestige. Indeed, Critias considered philosophy to be an elaborate scam, intellectual ephemeria that could be used to acquire very real comforts, and social standing. Then a plague hit, which killed over a third of the city's populace. The surviving leaders desperately needing to deflect attention from themselves. So they accused Critias of corrupting the city's youth with propaganda. They gave him a choice, death or exile. Critias had grown to appreciate the comforts of life over dying for the truth. So he packed up his things and took one final bath before fleeing Delphi. Before he could depart, however, he was visited by a strange man, a Brujah, known as Menelaus. The vampire had been ardent follower of Critias' rhetorical games and wanted the sophist as his child. Menelaus confronted Critias in the baths, using his formidable powers of domination to keep the sophist calm. They spent the night in vigorous debate over the nature of life, death, and the role of philosophy in both. Before the dawn, Critias became the victim of his own method, and he realized that his own edicts and philosophy were real, substantial, and worth dying for. Or perhaps worth living for the first time. After admitting defeat, Menelaus offered Critias a new choice. Die for the truth, right then and there, and live for eternity, and act the gadfly to the world. Critias chose the embrace. Kindred knights, his master's vessel. The two kindred traveled across the Mediterranean, North Africa. Menelaus taught his child about the secrets of kindred society, while Critias met with the greatest thinkers of the age, spending nights debating philosophy and logic. Between visits, he would drink from Menelaus, not realizing the dangers of the blood bond. Eventually, Critias made his way to Carthage, the center of Clan Brujah's plan to control the world. They used the city to plan for a golden age of kindred and kind, where philosopher kings would rule with logic, respect, democratic debates. Critias was quickly swept up by the grand vision, and he became passionately devoted to the cause. He was exploring China when he heard the news that Carthage fell, as well as rumors of his sire's death. He was heartbroken, this time by the brutal prejudice of the Ventru and Malkavians, and he frequently fell into frenzies. It was only when he tore the throat out of a child that he realized his monstrous deeds. He decided to leave civilization and became a nomad, feeding only on animals and refusing the blood of mortals. Unbeknownst to him, his travels were manipulated by Menelae through their unusually strong bond. Eventually, in 1942, he came to Chicago. Unwittingly, he became enmeshed in the city's ornate and complex web of politics, forcing him to settle there, or so he thought. Cratius' deep political skill and wit, sharpened on millennia of intellects, caused him to quickly ascend to the position of Primogen. In his spare time, he taught a few courses at Chicago University to mortal students, often inviting good-looking and intellectual male students to his apartment for intellectual debate, sex, feeding, and occasionally conversion into ghouls. The entire time he continued to be a pawn of Menelae in his eternal fight with Helena. When Prince Loden was killed, Chryseis convinced the Primogen to rule the city until a suitable candidate was found. A state that lasted for nearly 2 decades. Menelae grew tired of fighting. He started to believe that some force, perhaps the antediluvians, perhaps another, was manipulating them into conflict. Inspired by his child's eternal effort to educate others, he turned his puppets to loftier goals, the education of young Brujah, to return them to their original incarnation as intellectuals. Rather than brutish thugs, Critias started the so-called Intellici school, and then it all fell apart. Menelae succumbed to the beckoning. Critias felt the ancient blood bond snap, and knew with terrible certainty that he had been manipulated for millennia. He was no longer certain how much of his life was his, and how much was at the behest of his twice-dead sire. He spent 3 nights in frenzy, injuring several in the Intellici school in the process. For a month afterwards, the elder Brujah refused to leave his haven, as he examined every action, every decision, trying to determine how much of his life was his and how much was the manipulations of his sire. He feels the beckoning himself, but believes the breaking of his blood bond has somehow delayed the effects. Then, letters implicating him and Annabel as the Primogen supporting Maldavis leaked out. In fact, the small incident that was brought Chryseis back to the council. He realized he had lost much in his grip over Chicago, and had to embed himself more deeply in the city. Thinking the pool of the beckoning was another manipulation by Menelae, from beyond the grave, Chryseis was trapped himself in the web of politics and obligation within the city. He's even gone so far as to increase his connections with the mortal realm, and will only feed from people born in Chicago, both to rebuild his fleeting humanity and to ensure he has no desire to ever leave Chicago. Plots and schemes. Dirty papers. Several letters implicating Annabel and Chryseis as the Primogen for supporting Maldavis in the council wars have leaked and are on the street. If the letters are acquired, Cratius could leverage them to crush Maldavis's growing rebellion. Tradition lessons. Critias is attempting a new experiment, teaching the ethics, debate, and philosophy to any kindred of any clan. Some of the La Sombra have a particular interest in finding a way to cling to moral codes that they reject, as they reject the Sabbat. The local Nosferatu believe this experiment is a masquerade breach waiting to happen, and look to assemble a coterie to break it up. Eternal Academy. Despite Critias' aim of shoring up his withering conscience, his Eternal Academy, built to replace his destroyed Entelechy school, has led to a score of executions within Kindred students, have failed the course on traditions and Camarilla etiquettes. Critias wishes he could put the punishment down to the sheriff, but it's his furious frustration with the failing students that leads so many deaths. He wishes he never agreed to Prince Jackson's plan, and feels he's played into the Venture's hands with his loose temper. But he won't back out now until he gets full class to graduate to Camarilla standards. He lied to me. Critias still hasn't come to terms with Melanie's epic deception. He simply repressed his outrage and anger because he cannot afford to lose control over himself again. As he carefully examines and dissects his choices and decisions, he can only come to one inescapable conclusion. If everything he has done is at the will of Menelee, then he must be Menelee. This will not go well. Domain and Haven. University housing, Haven 2, Retainers 1. Critias has abandoned his haven on South University Avenue, believing it to be a trap Melanie set up. Now, he lives in a small house maintained by the University of Chicago Commercial Real Estate Operations, or the CREO, the CREO. The house is maintained by his prize student, Mahaver, who lives with him and watches over him during the day. Thralls and Tools. University faculty, contacts 3, heard of 2, influence 2, resources 2. Students, contacts 2, heard of 3, influence 2. Critias has controlled the University of Chicago for decades, to the point that some younger Brujah joke he is the prince of Hyde Park, despite that other kindred in residence there. Critias has never shown any interest in controlling other areas of the city, but has recently and aggressively been expanding his control over the university. His command over faculty and students alike serves him both as a herd and as retainers to see him as another member of staff. Mahaver Camarilla. I am not pronouncing that properly, and I apologize to any of you who have that name, and I'm butchering it. Retainer 1. Mahaver, one of Critias' mortal students, is a bright and passionate philosophy major, and his debates in class evoke memories of the passionate discussions in Carthage. Mahaver also struggles with his attraction to Critias, afraid his conservative family will disown him should they find out their son is gay. This has caused Mahaver to become even more dependent on Chrysius. The elder, however, is reluctant to turn Mahaver into a ghoul. He knows all too well the prison of the blood bond and is loath to subject another to it. Kindred relationships. Anita Wainwright, surprising. Gerard, energizing. Chrysius has been educating some of the younger and anarch-sympathetic Brujah in the city, particularly Anita and Gerard. He doesn't agree with their philosophy, but loves debating them. Interesting. Primogen Council. Irritation. He has been taking his role as Primogen more seriously since his sire's betrayal. Sometimes he will stand contrary to the council's wishes or fight against a proposed plan, just to make sure he and the Primogen aren't being manipulated. His recent bouts of devil's advocate haven't won him many supporters from among his peers. Kevin Jackson, loyalty. Chrysius has always felt loyal to the Camarilla and therefore loyal to the Primogen and Prince. When the latter role is occupied, he reports back to Prince Jackson on potential neonates and fledglings, threats to the masquerade if he feels he can't hammer out their kinks in his academy. Whispers. Discriminatory. Chrysius is sexist and gay. He originally only taught male Brujah, and even to this night clearly prefers them over female students. Hearing voices. Chrysius is ancient and insane. Once in a while, you can hear him talking to someone named Melanie. Or something. Even if no one else is around. Many faces. Chrysius is an anarch, or damn near. He's been quietly supporting the anarchs since the 80s, and his Eternal Academy is just a way of getting recruits. I would like to remind you that whispers are in fact the rumors about that character, so do with them as you will. Mask and mane. Chrysius is an elderly-looking gentleman. He's a little on the plump side, and he stands no more than 5 feet tall. He's mostly bald, though often wears a thick wig, while with little white hairs and a thick white beard. His face is deeply wrinkled, and in recent years he has had a haunted look in his eyes. In the privacy of his haven, he still prefers to wear Athenian-style robes. Students have caught him like this a few times, but each time he comes up with an elaborate excuse. Chrysius's mask is Professor Demetrius Columbaris, a semi-retired teacher of philosophy at the University of Chicago. Before this disguise, he was Professor James Kazan. Another semi-retired teacher of philosophy, and before this, he was Professor Manos Papagenio. Few vampires would have gotten away with simply changing his name and address, and that acting as sufficient cover. But few vampires in Chicago possess the powerful mental skills of Chrysius or His sire, Mask 2. Sire, Menele. Embraced, 423 BCE. Born 478 BCE. Sorry, embraced 423. Ambition, discover the real Cratius. He just wants to get to know himself. Convictions, never be manipulated by anyone ever again. Touchstone, Menhover. His most devoted mortal student. In him, Cratius sees freedom. Humanity 6, Generation 5, Blood Potency 8. Ouch. Attributes. Strength 5, Dexterity 4, Stamina 5, Charisma 3, Manipulation 5, Composure 2, Intelligence 5, Wits 5, Resolve 5. Secondary attributes. Health 8, Willpower 7. Skills. Athletics 2, Melee 3, Etiquette 3, Insight 3, Intimidation 5, Leadership, specialized in Oratory 4, Persuasion 4, Academics, specialized twice in Philosophy and Sophistry 5, Awareness 3, Occult 4, Politics, specialized in Camarilla 4, Science 2, Disciplines. Auspex 4, Celerity 2, Dominate 4, Fortitude 2, Potence 3, and Presence 5. Next, Sheriff Damien. Epitaph. Reluctant Sheriff. Anything to get the band back together. Quote. Nothing. Clan Brujah. Mortal days. Anything to survive. Damien's first memories were of pain, loneliness, and persecution. He doesn't remember his parents, celebrated musicians of the Chicago's Black Renaissance who sang to him daily, and their tragic deaths. He doesn't remember the rapid blows of a beefy fist to his face and his head slamming into the ground over and over and over again, until a fuzzy adult-sized figure intervened. Jeremiah, 12, 5 years his senior, and Damien's personal demon at Wayward Retreat Orphanage and the Glover Park neighborhood. The daily beatings preceded Damien being scolded by the staff until he escaped the orphanage at the age of 8. On the street, he did anything to make money to survive. He sang, recited poems, stole food from dumpsters outside grocery stores, and pickpocketed nightclub goers. Damien fell in with a small band of other kids like himself, led by an older boy, Taylor Rich. A year or so later, he was running for policy, the illegal numbers game. His youth and size let him escape most people's attention. The few times he was caught, Damien would act like a big man, frequently getting a laugh or distracting his captors just enough for a quick escape. Policy used him less after it came under mafia control. Taylor, Jen, and Chad were the last of his found family. They all had to make money or else. Needing more money, he turned to his primary talent, singing, for some quick cash, or whatever he could use to get by. Maybe it was his voice, his passion for life at age 14 that drew Cratius to him. But Damien would be the next member of a ragtag family to vanish without warning. The ancient vampire embraced the child, gifting him with immortality, then left him sireless, with no memory of who embraced him. Kindred Knights, an unlikely vocation. For years, Damien raided mafia safe houses for cash to pay for his lifestyle, until Capone's goons started to carry stakes. One raid nearly led to his final death. Had it not been for the timely intervention of Johann Keller, a Malkavian elder who believed Damien to be his son, Keller taught the boy about vampire traditions and the Camarilla. Shortly afterward, Damien befriended Victoria McCoy, a Cardiff actress, and the two became blood-bound lovers. In the 1980s, Damien joined the already established band Baby's Chorus as the new lead singer. The War of Chicago raged on in the streets while Baby's Chorus entertained the masses packed into the cave. Damien leapt down into the crowd to sing when he saw the war firsthand. The fans were cheering their names when Damien turned back towards the band and saw a 10-foot-tall, fur-covered nightmare of death, rendering Garwood to ash. A half-dozen more lupines emerged from thin air. The fake Little Big Man syndrome vanished as Damien's Brujah blood boiled and he soared into the blood rage. The battle at the cave left many dead, mauled, or broken. The wake of the war left Damien alone again, with no mentor, friends, or band. Johann died at the hands of the Sabbat. Victoria, his caitiff lover, perished in battle with lupines, as did Baby's Chorus in the cave. He saw magic before that death. He yearned to understand it and began researching the occult to better prepare for the next war. The music called to him, and he knew the only thing that mattered was Baby's Chorus. He spent the next decade appealing to Kathy Glenn's to come back to the band, to no avail. He would restart the band multiple times only to fail. In the late 2000s, Prince Jackson offered Damien the role of Sheriff of Chicago. Damien refused, but before Jackson left, he asked the Prince why he would want him in the role. He remembers the Prince's long laugh at the naivete of such an obvious question. Damien, to protect the city, I need someone who's not beholden to any of the old guard. Someone who will follow the Prince's orders, who can endure hardships and be my right hand. I could command you to do this, but would rather you choose it. The position shall remain open, with hounds enforcing the law until a sheriff is found. Damien, once again, pleaded with Kathy to restart the band, and she refused. With little holding him back, Damien wandered the states, playing music in Anarch and Camarilla cities alike. One night, he heard the first whispers of the Sombra making moves towards the Camarilla. An Anarch spoke of one of their numbers in Chicago monitoring an approach of Keeper dignitaries. Unknown to Damien, the Anarch was speaking of Maldavis. Damien headed back to Chicago with a plan to get the band back together. For a number of years, the position of sheriff remained unfulfilled. Damien went to Prince Jackson to request that Baby's chorus be placed center stage, and in return, Damien would accept the role. The prince agreed, and Damien became sheriff of Chicago. It's taking him surprisingly little time to start punishing other kindred to the fullest extent of his power, leaving him to wonder if this was his destiny all along. Plots and schemes. Longing for fame, Damien set up a record studio under the name Alicia Wilson to sell Baby Forest-related materials and the occasional audio from performances. He's creating a lifeline for the band if the deal with the prince does not work. Reinforcements. All the hounds were picked by the prince and are loyal to him. Damien plans to double their number before the negotiations. The prince's hounds are better at keeping the peace than bringing the pain, and Damien wants to hand select more fighters than diplomats. Sorcerer's Touch. The werewolves deepened Damien's desire to understand magic. He can be found reading, researching, and questioning anyone with knowledge of the supernatural. Damien wants to be prepared to combat werewolves, Hecata, or La Sombra. He has stumbled over the references to Oblivion. Dark Echoes. Damien hears the gentle call of the beckoning, and from everything he's heard, it's going to get louder. He's intent on finding someone who knows how to stave off the call. Take them out back. Prince Jackson has commanded Damien to clean up the anarch nuisance in Chicago, but to do it discreetly. One of the anarchs provided Jackson with a list of compromising 10 anarchs to remain untouched. A list of 10 anarchs to remain untouched, leaving the rest as fair game. Damien believes in the promise of the Camarilla and swore an oath of loyalty to Jackson, so he now pursues every errant anarch in the domain. Domain and Haven. Starchild Studios, Haven 2, Resources 2. Damien's Haven is Starchild Studios in the Lakeview neighborhood. He sleeps in a secret compartment within the soundproof walls. To date, nobody knows he rests here during the daytime. Avondale offices. Contact 3, Haven 1. Prince Jackson has provided an office in Avondale for Damien's use as sheriff. The Brujah keep files here on various troubled kindred, such as Balthazar, the Hound, Alexa, Santos, and a thick folio on the crimes he suspects Jason Newberry has committed. Thralls and Tools. Camarilla Kindred, Allies 3, Contacts 3. Damien lost many of his anarch connections by becoming sheriff. He has a number of deputies and the prince's law at his command. But, at a street level, he's persona non grata. Studio and Crew. Allies Studio Crew. Allies 2, Contacts 2, Influence 2, Groupies, Contacts 2, Fame 4, Herd 3, Retainers 1. Damien's strong mortal bond are with the Studio Crew, Gale and Loti Stafford. and the Baby's Chorus groupies who attend every gig. He has developed an attraction to a groupie named Susanna Fisher, who had been following the band since they first formed. His bandmates smirk at the relationship between the apparently young Damien and the clearly mature Susanna, but enjoy that he has such a connection to humanity. Kindred relationships. Kathy Glenn's family. Damien considers Baby Chorus his family, with Kathy his closest connection to Vampire World. She is the big sister of the group, and he would sacrifice everything to keep her safe. Kevin Jackson, admiration. Damien's relationship with Kevin Jackson is a strange one. He's Brujah, while the prince is Ventru. Damien rarely towed the Camarilla line, but now he's sheriff and carries out Jackson's command no matter how vicious. Damien knows his motives for such blind servitude are weak, but he also knows that without the band he has nothing. He can't help but admire Jackson for how far he's come. Whispers. It's a hit. Record producers are showing up wherever Baby Chorus played. Some people believe Damien sent MP3 files out to catch their attention for some reason and could break the masquerade. Bomb in the works. He's an anarch and is targeting established Kindred to weaken the city's power structure for a revolt. That is why he's recruiting more hounds. Skills in question. The vampire murders around the city are beyond such a young sheriff's ability to resolve. Someone needs to replace him with a proper investigator. Mask and mean. Damien has created an identity for himself called Damien Bishop, whose parents died when he was 4. He's currently in the custody of his reclusive uncle, Alan Bishop. Mask 1. Alicia Wilson was also created as the band's manager and owner of Starchild Studios. She's a phantom. However, she only exists on paper. Damien is a scrawny, overly tall African American kid with dark brown skin that's cool to the touch. While eternally 14, he appears a few years older and is malnourished from years of living on the street. His hair is cut short, and his piercing brown eyes are darkish gray skin. On stage, he sports a Baby's Chorus t-shirt, black pants, Converse shoes. Blush of life darkens his complexion and makes him warm to the touch. His sire is Chrysius. His embrace was 1962. He was born in 1948. His ambition, get Baby's Chorus trending, despite the risk of the masquerade. Convictions, maintain order for the prince. Touchstone, Julia and John Rich, the grandchildren of his childhood friend Tyler Rich, reinforce his need to keep the kindred away from mortal eyes. Humanity of 6, Generation 6, Blood Potency of 5, Attributes, Strength 4, Dexterity 4, Stamina 5, Charisma 3, Manipulation 3, Composure 4, Intelligence 2, Wits 3, Resolve 4. Secondary attributes, Health 8, Willpower 8. Skills, Athletics 3, Brawl. He is specialized against armed opponents, 4. He has a Drive of 3, Firearms of 3, Larceny of 2, melee of 2, stealth of 4, survival 2, intimidation of 2, performance singing and guitar of 4, awareness, specialized in ambushes, 3, investigation, specialized in deduction, 3, law 2, occult 1, politics 2. His disciplines are auspex 1, celerity 3, potence 3, and presence 1. Thomas Ewell, also known as Balthazar. Just a curiosity, wanting to see. Okay. Epitaph. Live rich and covered in the blood of war. Clan Brujah. Mortal days. Traitors. Raider. Thomas Ewell was an aristocrat, spoiled and privileged, born in 1827 in southern Georgia. He was beaten by a violent father, instilling in him hatred for authority. When it was found that Thomas had in turn killed several of the slaves on his family's cotton plantation, he was exiled from home. Thomas never healed those deep psychological wounds and was never further punished for his crimes. So he headed north to New York, fitting in well there with the street gangs who had free rein to do as they pleased. It was there he found himself when the Civil War broke out, and used it as an excuse to rally up other local Confederates, to raid the New England coast, and build a fortune of his own. His violent passion for conquest inspired and impressively loyal in the outlaws who followed him. Although he mostly used the war as an excuse to steal and murder, the premise of the war set him firmly on the side of the South. Not for any loyalty to kin or home, but rather from a disgust at seeing any slaves freed. A deep-set racism has settled into his violent heart. He raided as far north as Canada, where he settled for a brief period of time with his fleeting fortunes. It was in Canada that the vampire Alexis Blaine took notice of Ewell. Alexis had fled Paris to escape the Camarilla and settled in Ottawa as one of the 4 city barons. The two met at a society ball, and she was irresistibly drawn to his violent, domineering, aristocratic nature. He saw her as a driven heiress from whom he could rain his fortunes. But she was more than a femme fatale than he realized. Ewell thought he was manipulating her, which Alexis found adorable, and chose to embrace him days after the war ended. She was far more ruthless than he, which surprised and delighted him. Kindred knights. Alliance to none but himself. Ewell remained in Canada with his sire after Confederate defeat, and took on the new name of Balthazar to fit his new identity. With Alexis, he found he could be himself, but he grew more independent than the woman he had met. He quickly tired of this once he learned she was the one in control, and Ewell moved out, refusing to submit to her power or recognizing her authority as Prince of Ottawa. In the late 1870s, Balthazar and his new child Mayor Levesque ventured to Chicago in the hope of establishing a Brujah state. They were fast friends with Modius, a local power broker, who was waging a war against Chicago's corrupt political system. Balthazar encouraged Alexis to join them, and the three joining Modius's side in the Kindred War, far from brutal than he could have ever dreamed. Modius's followers bored Balthazar with their politics. However, and he soon grew weary to their poverty-drenched activism. There was no fortune to be won in this war, only a territory he wasn't thrilled to be rebuilding. Alexis became more intolerable to him. By the night, at the height of her power and disregarding most anything he had to say in favor of Mayor and Modius, at this point Balthazar fell back into his decadent aristocratic patterns, the passion for war draining from him as he felt powerless. He started attending the elite parties again, which is where he met the Ventru Hines. It turns out that to be a historic meeting, since at the time Hines was on the hunt for ways to take out Modius in Loden's name. And here was one of the prize generals in his war. Balthazar agreed to betray Modius and Alexis in exchange for a handsome sum and the freedom to choose whomever he wanted as vassals. That night, Balthazar led the group of Ventru to Modius's haven. Balthazar drove a stake through Alexis's heart and watched her burn as the place caught fire. Mark's anger was palpable. And though Balthazar could feel his murderous intentions, he couldn't bring himself to dispatch his child. One day, he hoped Mark would come around and get over the woman who stood between them. The Primogen respected Balthazar, and he gained notoriety under Loden's reign, younger vampires fearing his ruthless unpredictability. He used this to his advantage and assisted Ballard in the suppression of the city's anarchs. Loden wielded Balthazar like a sword, using his violence to rid Chicago of anyone he disliked. And he kept the Brujah placated with every debased luxury he could desire. Chicago Brujah universally developed hatred toward Balthazar, calling him a traitor to his face. Even the Hellenes, Critias and Damien, called Balthazar caitiff. Every time he hears an insult, he hates himself just a little bit more, and remembers betraying his sire, and the self-hatred gets doubly projected on the victims of his next violent spree. Once Prince Jackson took Chicago, Balthazar's unlife became difficult. He was ousted from the inner circle. Jackson wanted nothing to do with this violent, racist Brujah. He's now barely tolerated by most in power, although some Primogens secretly still communicate with Balthazar and keep him in the loop. It's only a matter of time before someone else wields this violent Brujah to their own ends. And he does something stupid. Or he does something stupidly destructive. Plots and schemes. Modern pirates. Balthazar lost all his money he was once given while Loden supported him. He needs to find some kind of patron, or he's going to start up his old habits of raiding for wealth again. Since raiding could be a masquerade breach, he'll be on the prince's radar again, which will put him at higher risk. The question of how to control such a loose cannon will be an issue for many kindred in the city. Brujah War. Balthazar wouldn't want to kill Mark Levesque. If he finds out he survived the War of Chicago, but the conflict between them would be inevitable. Who is the greater evil in this scenario is questionable. And although Mark could be changed for the better, Balthazar is beyond saving. Cabin fever. No longer invited to many society events and unable to take out his anger on the anarchs. It's just a matter of time until Balthazar does something violent and stupid. He could easily kill the wrong person. Domain and Haven. Bedford Park Warehouse. Haven 1, Resources 1. Since Balthazar's fall from grace in Chicago, he's had to retreat to a poorer lifestyle. He's not one to plan or stockpile money, so most of what he once had, he now lost. He spends much time in the most practical of his havens, the basement of an old warehouse in Bedford Park. He'll even couch surf with a fellow kindred, if they allow it. Suburban Prey. Herd 1. Balthazar, now a wanderer in the city, feeding where he can on the outskirts to cause the least hassle for himself, he's outrageously impatient with this situation. And one night or another, he'll hunt in a place where he's not supposed to be. This guy just seems to have everything going wrong for him right now. Thralls and Tools. LZ Contact 1. Balthazar has no friends in the city, but there are a few violent criminals he's intimidated into doing menial tasks. Chief among these is LZ, a low-tier gang member and drug dealer. If Balthazar needs any kind of street gossip, random human necessities, or something to bully, LZ is it. Kindred relationships. Kevin Jackson. Hatred. Balthazar hates almost everything about Prince Jackson. Not only did he strip Balthazar of his power, money, and influence in the city, he doesn't believe a black vampire is fit to run the city. His racism towards the prince is well known by Jackson himself, and it seems Jackson doesn't mind it at all. In fact, Jackson loves lording his power over his fallen Brujah, a vestige of older, more brutal times. Portia. Suspicion. Balthazar developed an obsession over the apparently young Toreador based on the sheer number of kindred he noticed deferring into her in subtle ways. He's made a map of kindred he believes owe her something. and keeps it in his back pocket. Interesting. Whispers. Stick to the living. Balthazar has been haunting some mortal society events he knows will be void of kindred. Memories. He's recently taken to a young mortal woman who looks and acts strikingly like Alexis. Good graces. Anarchs have gone missing one by one recently, and while there's no proof, many suspect Balthazar is behind it. Assassin. Balthazar, hatred of Prince Jackson is well known. Some think he might be plotting to back an outside party in overthrowing him. Mask and mean. Balthazar has very expressive face and mostly showcases his disappointment with everyone around him. He's only seen smiling in the midst of a violent display. Yesterday's well-to-do fashions fit a sturdy frame, and he's got a rugged sort of handsomeness, usually obscured by his ruthless nature. He has been seen in one contemporary suit he keeps carefully to do so that he can maintain an air of aristocracy wow, while out and about. Of late, there's a wildness about him that could rival a gangrel. He does little to mask his kindred nature anywhere, which makes him dangerous to all around him. Balthazar was protected by Loden and the Primogen for so long. He never needed a mortal guise. Now he struggles to create one. He is a vampire out of his element. Sire, Alexis Blanc. Embraced 1865, born in 1827. Ambition, prove I am better than the upstart prince. Conviction, never hesitate to accept an easy way to riches. Touchstones, LZ, a gang member and drug dealer that Balthazar bullies. Humanity 3, Generation 8, Blood Potency 3. Attributes, Strength 4, Dexterity 3, Stamina 3, Charisma 4, Manipulation 3, Composure 2, Intelligence 3, Wits 4, Resolve 3. Secondary attributes, Health 6, Willpower 5. Skills, Athletics 3, Brawl, specialized in dirty fighting 4. Drive 2, Firearms 3, Melee 1, Larceny 3, Survival 1, Insight 2, Intimidation, specialized in bullying 3, Leadership 2, Persuasion 1, Streetwise 3, Subterfuge 1, Academics, specialized in history 1, Awareness 3, Investigation 1, Occult 1, Politics, specialized in Camarilla 2. Discipline. Celerity 2, Fortitude 2, Potence 4, Presence 3. And I believe I will go ahead and save the Fiors for next time. Thank you for joining me with this extensive look at the Hellenes of Clan Brujah for the Chicago Kindred. And I will see you next time in our World of Darkness. I am Voivode Maquette. Thank you for joining me. Please drop a like, subscribe, and please comment. I'd love to hear from you. Have a good evening. Goodbye.